Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm José.
And today we've seen The Fabelmans.
Yes.
Which is Steven Spielberg's long-awaited semi-autobiographical film about a young Jewish boy growing up in the 1950s who aspires to be a filmmaker. Semi-autobiographical is maybe putting it lightly. It seems
very autobiographical.
extremely deeply inspired by Spielberg and his family, and not only is it clear kind of anyway, but before the credits roll at the start, before the film begins, Spielberg pops up on screen thanking us for visiting the cinema to see this film that he says is a love letter to his parents and a love letter to cinema. He thanks us for visiting the cinema.
That creeped me out because I took it as a sure sign that cinema is dead. If you have, the most successful film director of our time thanking people for merely showing up, at a cinema, then I think it's doomsday.
Yeah, I think it's partly they're showing up for a certain kind of film as well. I think people are becoming, or the industry maybe, is kind of having to get used to the idea that the prestige film in particular is kind of dead. This is a 2.5 hour autobiographical film about a family that for a while kind of has very little drama in its life. Early on I'm thinking, I'm not very involved in this because this family is fine, right? Later, obviously, the drama kind of develops. But...
Well, I just think these are changing expectations. I mean, I think 10 years ago, this would have been 100 million grosser for sure. And, there would have been no problem getting the audience out for it. I mean...
You reckon?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing that Spielberg was kind of famous for, really. Like, he got people out for The Color Purple.
Well, I think more than 10 years ago. 10 years ago, I think it was already not the biggest kind of movie going.
When did DVD really crash? When did kind of video on demand really take over?
5 or 6 or 7 years ago, maybe.
Okay, well, that is the moment of transition. Before that, you would have got an audience for this type of film from Spielberg. Maybe not from anyone else, but definitely from Spielberg. Because also... he is the exception to the rule. I mean, he is somebody who's had like very, very few flops in his career, really.
Well, this one is one, financially speaking. Well, it cost some $40 million, and I think it's only just about made that back.
Well...
Although it has also been nominated for 7 Academy Awards and a whole host of other awards.
And, there's all the other markets to follow. So I'm sure it'll make money. But, yeah, the market for this type of film... theatrically, for sure, is definitely not what it was. And it's a pity, because I thought it was marvelous, actually. I'm not Spielberg's biggest fan. I mean, I think he's a marvelous technical director, but I think his best films, for me, are the ones that don't make any demands on a complex understanding of people and life, from the director, right? Jaws, E.T., wonderful. I think all the most recent films that we've seen, I think they're kind of technically astonishing, and then they always leave me a bit cold, or I find them banal. I thought Bridge of Spies was kind of banal to have that conception of, American politics in the world. I thought it was almost stupid. Yeah, even though some of the scenes were just technically dazzling. Likewise...
West Side Story. That was his last, in fact.
I know, but actually, I think my appreciation of West Side Story has diminished with time. Not that I didn't think it marvelous when I saw it, right? And I did think it dazzling. But I find it interesting that in my mind, the version of West Side Story that remains is the Natalie Wood version.
I don't think that's enormously surprising. It is a classic. But it's also a film you grew up with and have loved for donkey's years.
That's true.
This has only had a year to get under your skin.
That's true, and that might change with time. But I just think that's interesting. So it's not that there's competing. It's not... other films that are remade, I think, I like this scene better in this one, that scene better in that one, right? But, that is a question for me. Kind of, why isn't it more vivid in my memory, whereas the original one kind of really is? Yeah. But anyway, that's almost besides the point. I suppose the point I'm trying to make is that I think, bar a few things, I think this is an almost perfect film.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
I think that highly of it. I wasn't bored through it at all. I loved all of the first scenes, the showing of the family and the introduction of the camera and how this young boy falls in love with cinema and how the mother encourages him. I thought that was all kind of marvelous, really, and fun. Yeah, and funny and kind of, with an awe for the wonder, and magic of the films, really. Also, kind of interestingly, I thought it was interesting, for example, that they used the C.B. DeMille, The Greatest Show on Earth, as, that moment where he falls in love with cinema. Because in many ways, that's the kind of cinema that Spielberg's detractors accuse him of. It's spectacle, it's kind of crashes and the equivalent of Aliens, I suppose, circus people. DeMille is also kind of bombastic and melodramatic and superficial, I think, about people. But
is that something you think of Spielberg, or is that a difference you see between DeMille and Spielberg?
No, I think that is something that I also think of Spielberg. I think he's a marvelous technical director. He's fantastic with spectacle and so on. I think, for me, his weakness is a too superficial understanding of people and the world. And the difference in this film is he knows these people intimately. But also, to be fair, he doesn't plumb depths, right? Like, he wants a particular view of his parents. The film oozes with love and understanding, both of his father and his mother, and it's lovely to see. I did think at the beginning, because the film begins in 1952, that, that's the moment that we're introduced, and the family's Jewishness is made plain from the beginning.
Yeah,
right?
central.
And, I think, my initial thought was this 6 years after the films of the Holocaust, the filmic revelation of the Holocaust. His father had been in the war. The mother's an artist, So kind of, how does it feel to be a Jew in America, 6 years after the Holocaust? I mean, they must have had anxieties and troubles and relatives lost and, there's no hint of any possibility of darkness. Now, maybe, Spielberg's real parents hid it from the kids, who would want to traumatize them, right? But you'd think a different filmmaker would have at least put that somewhere along the edges of that cozy suburban family in New Jersey, right? Where there's kind of no evidence of any of that in this film. Nothing darkens this.
Once they leave Jersey, elements of discomfort and ultimately anti-Semitism creep into the film. So we don't see any of that in Jersey. Then they move to Arizona, and all we get there is the mother at one point saying, "We're the only Jewish family here." But we haven't seen it expressed anywhere else that that's a feeling of discomfort that she has. She just says it in a line. Once we get to California, then bullies at school pick on Sam, the main character, the Spielberg analogue, for his Jewishness. And it's explicit there. But it does feel like there's a missing element to that.
Well, I mean, I think he kind of whitewashes it a little bit. So, in Jersey, you have it's a cozy Jewish suburban family, right? When they move to Arizona, it really becomes kind of multicultural, at least on the edges, right? The star of his film has an Italian name, and kind of, you do see kind of people of different hues in the in the frame. There is a sense of, maybe they're just one different kind of group amongst many different kinds of groups, right? I think that was the sense I got, right? And I did love, that move into California. And what was the line he used? We're in the land of giant...
I feel like we've moved to the land of giant sequoia trees.
Sequoia trees.
Because everyone's massive and Aryan.
And Aryan, yes.
And it's a very specific look.
So I love that, and I identified with that. I sometimes felt like that myself, in parts of Canada.
There's a tiny little Spaniard.
Yeah. So I really identified with that moment. Though I also think the weakest moment in the film is the corridor scene after the screening of the film.
It's an interesting scene. So, obviously, by this point, we're going to be in spoiler territory. What's happened by this point is Sam has given up filmmaking because he's sort of been unhappy with his family and things like that. But he takes it up again and is persuaded to make this movie of Ditch Day, which is a day where all the kids go down to the beach at his new school. And he's put it together for prom, and it's shown at prom, and it goes down really well. And one thing that he's done in this film is he's taken one of his bullies, who is this like 9-foot tall Aryan god, and he's shot him as that. So he was kind of topless on the beach playing volleyball, and we see him as a hero. And the kid confronts him in this corridor after that screening, upset by it. He says, I want to know why you did this. Why did you do this? I've been torturing you all year. Why were you nice to me? And why are you showing me something that I'm not? I don't believe I'm this. Everyone else believes I'm this now. And it's an interesting... It's about the power of imagery to manipulate, you know? Like, the Sam character says, I don't know why I did it. Maybe I did it to make my film better. I don't know. And he doesn't seem to have really wanted to hurt the kid. But there is definitely a feeling... Well, there was a feeling of, like, the revenge of having been bullied by this kid is that I was able to lie about you to everyone, kind of. I was able to, like, the power that I've had with my camera, with my editing, is to show you in a way that you weren't in control of. There's an element of that, feeling of that.
I think there's also, because he also says, maybe I just did it for my movie. That it looks better and, you know, it gives it a narrative and so on.
Which may be a kind of self-effacing kind of comment from Spielberg that is it a kind of like self-admission? It is just all about the image, about the spectacle, and I didn't think about things beneath it. Is there a kind of...
Except he thought enough to get revenge on the other guy, right?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, so...
And he doesn't show him in a good light at all, and he is mocked mercilessly.
Yeah, I really didn't like that scene. It felt really phony to me.
I like the end of it, but I agree with you. I think a lot of the... I mean, when it got to the school in California, there is a feeling of phoniness and artifice to all of that.
I mean, there's some things about it that I liked. I liked the way that the actor, I forget his name, was brilliant, playing young Spielberg.
Gabriel LaBelle is the teenage Spielberg.
He's wonderful. As soon as they move to LA, he seems to physically shrink.
Yeah.
And I thought that was kind of marvelous, to kind of convey that visually, because you know it's obviously a choice. I found it very moving. You know, it's kind of a difficult film to do, because what you get pictured is a really loving family, right? And people who really love each other, and everybody trying to do the right thing, right? And you know, there's something that pulls you in a direction that you can't quite control. And at a certain point, it becomes about either, you know, you lose yourself for others or you live your life. And it's nobody's fault, really. Yeah, because I think also Spielberg is careful to indicate that it's nobody's fault, that there hasn't been a transgression, that they haven't had sex, which I do not believe, you know. I don't.
This is Mitzi, the mother, and the friend of the family, Benny, played by
Seth Rogen.
Seth Rogen,
who they're all marvelous. Actually, I thought Seth Rogen, in a weird way, is at his sexiest. You know? Yes, you can. You know, I don't.
He's
know
never truly been sexy, though.
Well, I've never thought so, but I find him sexy in this, and I don't know if it's because he's lost weight or because you're seeing him through her eyes. Yeah, because he's also kind of, he looks like an ordinary bloke, but kind of on the handsome side, right? And, you know, quite masculine and nice, yeah. You know,
he's just cut his hair and he's well presented and he doesn't look like he smells of weed.
Well, he doesn't look like a dork. Yeah, he just looks like a nice guy who's actually kind of in love and up for it. Yeah, like, you know, there's something sexy about it, the way he moves and so on. Well, it's important for the film to see why she, you know, why she goes for him. And it's a combination of things. It's personal qualities, but also kind of, you know, the thing that he gives forth that Paul Dano doesn't is that sense of sexiness, of being up for it, of slight danger. Yeah, kind of. So I thought, you know, that was all a pleasure to see, though, again, kind of maybe idealized. I mean, it must have been harder than that and more emotionally wrenching, and, you know, kind of the interior struggles must have been much more difficult than they're made to seem in this film.
The whole film seems like a very sandpapered sort of fantasy memory.
Yes, I think it's the way that he'd like to see his parents, and one can't quite imagine things being so neat.
No, and once he started making films, the real young child Sam started making films, I started to get involved because I wasn't. And I suppose actually once they moved to Arizona and he starts making kind of films proper with new mates and he's so he's making films from when he's a little kid and he gets the train set and we see that and that's really lovely. That
I love that
experimentation with the train set, and there's this image of the 6-year-old, I think he might be 6-ish, Sammy with his hands up in front of him and projecting the image onto him, and it's like it's about you capturing it in your hands, but there's an image of prayer in there as well. It's like a religious thing. And I think that's an image that like everyone has kind of attached themselves to. Like that's beautiful. It's very memorable. But once he's, I guess, sort of develops a bit of agency, and then cracks start to appear in the perfection of the family. That's when I started to get. I was checking my watch before then. I was going.
Oh, I wasn't.
I don't know why I'm sitting through this right now, but I did start to get involved. But it is kind of bowdlerized. It feels like I wish it was a little bit harsher, a little bit more interesting.
It's very much, you know how families always tell stories about themselves, and kind of it's always mythic and fairy tale-ish. It's very rarely, messy. It's always an idealized version of how families like to see their history, and I think this film is like that. Yeah, it's kind of the stories the Spielbergs tell themselves about their families, without wanting to know too much. Yeah, that kind of, maybe this uncle whatever wasn't the first guy that the mom had, run off with, right? Or, the real pain that must have caused her to give up her career, or relatives in Europe that kind of got killed, or the film has the potentiality to have both what it is, but to let kind of darker things be discoverable on the edges, even if they're not highlighted. And I think the film doesn't do that. And I thought it was interesting because, David Lynch was brought in at the end to do the cameo as John Ford. His films are all about those darker elements that the conscious keeps a lid on, and that he pulls open the lid, right? And I thought it was also interesting because you see, when they were going into the office with the meeting with the famous director, I thought it would have been Hitchcock, right? Yeah, because I think Spielberg went to work on the Universal lot, right? And Hitchcock was the Universal lot. I'm sure I've read about them meeting and so on. And of course, Hitchcock is also full of darkness. But he also has that kind of wizardry with the camera and the cutting and the visuals that you see in Spielberg, and the spectacle, right? And I thought it was interesting that instead of choosing Hitchcock, he chose John Ford, right? Because, to me, John Ford is so much about darkness, and violence, and, and Irishness and bonhomie. It's not just, but he doesn't shy away from the darker, edges. Whereas, sandpaper is a good term, because with Spielberg, it's all sandpapered away. It's like you only get the glowy, understandable, humane bits. Yeah.
I kind of thought it would be Hitchcock as well. Yeah. Funnily enough,
I expected
going across the hall. But when it was revealed to be John Ford, it made sense to me because the film had been built around westerns so heavily.
Well, Who Shot Liberty Valance?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was one of the films that is highlighted.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then the films that he goes on to make, the one in particular that we see is this western.
Yeah, yeah. Influenced by Who Shot Liberty Valance.
I like Lynch showing up as well, just because he's very, very good. But he's done this role at least once before. He was in an episode of Louis, the FX sort of sitcom sort of show by Louis C.K., where he plays the CBS kind of executive who is training Louis C.K. to be a talk show host to take over from David Letterman, possibly. And he's in it for like 3 episodes. And he's a very similar sort of character. He's sitting there barking instructions. You can't really read him, sort of thing. And here, that's very much that, and it's all for comic effect, and it's wonderful. And of course, there's this conversation in the film about art throughout the film. I mean, it's interesting that the parents, one is a scientist and one is an artist, and there's talk, I think, even in that dinner scene where the girlfriend's there, about art and science and one or the other. And it made me think of the name of the academy is the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. It is, but like film combines the both. And we've seen that here. Film is art here. When he talks to his actor playing the soldier who's kind of accidentally condemned his troops to death, he manages to whip him up into the mood that he needs by speaking about it in artistic ways. The story that he's telling, and the actor is surprised even by how effective it's been on himself. But also, there's this scientific side to it, the technical side to it, where he explains that the way he got the muzzle flashes on the film was to literally poke holes in the celluloid so that light would shine through more brightly.
That was wonderful.
We see both of these things, and we feel this. It's very interesting that the film is kind of it's getting this, it's drawing this line that connects the two in a way.
I found it very moving throughout. Actually, I thought it was kind of loving and sweet and sad. So even though it didn't really plumb any depths, I really loved it, yeah. And I was very entertained, and I thought it was very funny. And I thought, that it was really great, at depicting like a young man's passion for cinema and how it almost got extinguished, right? And for all of these reasons that are kind of understandable and lovable in a way, yeah? Kind of, having caught his mother having an affair by filming her, yeah, which kind of makes the whole thing kind of dangerous and unwise and possibly destructive, right? And then the move, so how various family structures and obligations and so on almost like prevent him from doing what he really wants to do and following that path. I kind of found it very lovely, actually.
The shooting his mum and Benny in the background on that camping trip, and then finding all that in the footage and realising what was going on is interesting, because that is about film is truth. He discovers the truth through watching what he's filmed, and then by the time you get to the end and he's made the film for prom, film is lies, because he's able to manipulate it the way he wants to show things that aren't the truth.
Yes, that's interesting. I hadn't thought of that. That is interesting. Though, I think it was also telling, interesting choices that are made. So when editing the film reveals his mother's passion or affair or love for the Seth Rogen character. Yeah. It's interesting that there's nothing lewd about it or sexual. Yeah, it's all kind of holding hands or in looks that are loving or but they're not sexual. It's very interesting, I think, those choices that are made. So, the revelation of a betrayal for the father is really because you love someone else, or because the mother loves someone else also. Yeah, it's never because there's been any kind of transgression or any wrongdoing, right? It's all shown, as a feeling. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, they could have shown them with like his hand on his mother's breast or something, right? Like, yeah.
Well, one of the first things that he notices in that shot where the two of them walking off in the background into the woods is Benny putting his arm around Mitzi's waist, and she moves it away. She moves his hand away. So even though they're walking off together, and we see other shots in which they're sitting together or happy together, whatever, the physical touch is rebuffed.
Yes.
And it's not that she thinks she's being watched, because they seem to have no idea they're being watched.
Yes.
So it's completely a personal thing between the two of them that still she's not to be touched.
Yes.
in that way.
Yes. Which I don't quite buy.
I mean, right at the start, you said this is pretty much a perfect film, close to a perfect film.
Yes.
I don't feel I'm getting that impression from you that you think it's a close to perfect film. You like it clearly, and there's things that are very interesting about it to you, but close to perfect?
I did feel that because I thought that the film put me in a little bubble of understanding. Yeah, where what you're feeling is the love and affection and attempts to kind of keep things together. I mean, it's clear that the mother loves the father's crazy about the mother. You know, the mother also loves his Uncle Benny. Uncle Benny loves the kids, you know, so...
Is it about how it transported you, then, that kind of thing?
It is. I mean, I kind of felt... You feel the sadness because you know it's kind of unraveling, yeah, and it's, and it's unraveling simultaneously with the boy finding cinema and finding a calling and, you know, getting better and better at it, right? And that in itself is a source of delight to the mother. It's also delineating different kinds of relationships with the mother and the father, very different and both very loving, yeah? And the working out of things, right? So I suppose I don't mind that not every film has to plump the depths. Though, I mean, even as I'm speaking, I'm thinking, well, it doesn't have to plumb the... I mean, it could maintain a tone, but like even in Lubitsch, as he's being delightful about everything, you have suicide or attempted suicide. Yeah, like you can keep that feeling without negating the real complexities that kind of people undergo in situations like that. And I think that Spielberg does. So actually, I think the more I talk to you, the more of a niggle that is. Yeah, that, you know, that it's so idealized. And actually, that's so Spielberg.
Yeah.
Right.
But it is a very pleasant place to be.
It
while
is.
Watching it. And once I got invested in the film, which took a little time, like I say, I was with it too. And once the drama started developing the family, I believed it, you know.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of key. You do believe pretty much everything.
You
apart
do.
from maybe those school scenes once or twice.
And that's important, right? So even though I'm saying, there are complexities there that maybe aren't demonstrated, nonetheless, I was with the film the whole way, and I did believe it, and I kind of, you know, took pleasure in everything in it, really. And it didn't ring false to me at all until the high school bits.
And also the idea that Mitzi wasn't having it away with Benny. Physically.
Well, that didn't bother me. I mean,
but it's something you don't believe, you said.
I'm willing to go. I don't believe it, but I'm willing to go with the film on that. You know,
Right, yeah.
like, kind of, you know, that wasn't like it didn't take me out of the film the way the corridor scenes in the high school did, where you go, ugh.
Yeah, sure.
Right, like kind
I mean, the thing I really didn't believe about the corridor scene was the other bully, the little kind of shitty bully, running off the way he does.
It was so cliche.
I think it's because he's got such a long way to run down that corridor before he gets to the door. You think, why are you running this whole way?
Well, actually, I thought the coming, the situation, and the going
Yeah.
was just such a cliche. Like you expected it. And actually, you expect it to be better than it was. Yeah, you didn't expect it to be such a cliche.
I agree.
So I thought all of those scenes were a bit too much. It's like, so you see, the more I'm talking about the film, the more problems I'm coming with. So, for example, the scenes with the Christian girl, they're funny and they're sweet, yeah, and I like them, and they play well. But it's almost like, you know, Spielberg is trying too hard to reconcile differences and to be inclusive and to love everybody, right? And you can't deal with the question of racial discrimination and kind of love everybody. Like, someone has to be in the wrong. There has to be a problem, right? And I think what he tries to do is he makes the Christian girl completely lovable, even though, you know, she thinks he killed Christ, right?
Well, yeah, all the Christian kids. Well, the one Christian kid,
personally,
the shitty little bully is the one who accuses him of that. But you think, well, what I thought was actually, like, she I think, she's just got the hots for him, right? And it's great.
Sure.
But when they're at dinner and she says, oh, my dad's got this very expensive camera and he'll rent you this thing. He's going, if you're that Christian, you didn't get it from nowhere. The parents must be as well. And is the dad going to be all right with this Jewish kid?
Exactly.
You know?
I mean,
But we never get as far as meeting the dad.
And of course, you can't be one of the most successful mass industry entertainers, like, of the last 50 years and exclude people, right? Like, so, this attempt at being inclusive and kind of having a place for everybody and, we're all the same and all that. I get it, but I think he's trying too hard with it, really.
Yeah. The main issue I have with the film is that I just don't really care about people's love letters. Like, love letters are personal. Write a letter to your family, Well, I guess his parents are dead.
I know.
But I don't care. And the thing about love letters to cinema, we're seeing a few of these. We're seeing a few of these this week. So we've seen Babylon, which I didn't think of as a love letter to cinema until the end, when it becomes clear that there's this kind of I love movies, the magic of the movies thing going on that Damien Chazelle is trying to convince you of, at least. Obviously, this has been very clear from its conception. And its conception began in 1999. It's been a long time coming, The Fabelmans. And then tomorrow we're seeing Empire of Light, which is going to have that thing going on as well. All the adverts have been about the magic of the movie.
Well, we don't know that. We haven't seen it. But
sure, but it's at least being sold as such.
Sure.
And it feels...
like the death knell of cinema.
Right, exactly. Like if there's something very defiant about it, that these films are coming out now, kind of after COVID, which really hurts theatrical distribution, of course, because people couldn't go to the cinema for fucking ages. And after streaming's been the main way people have been consuming media for a long time now, for several years now. It does feel like there's this defiance of it, like this, I insist upon the cinema. And the fact that these films... I haven't seen The Empire of Light yet. The fact that these two films have not really convinced me of it, they've just insisted on it. Actually, the film I think I've seen recently that is the best expression of love of the movies and love of theatrical distribution, love of the cinema, is Avatar 2. That was different in the cinema than you will see anywhere else.
Yeah, true.
And it was about that. And of course, at no point was it saying, come to see the movies.
Though, I don't know, I think there are elements of that in this film as well. That incredible shot of the audience when they go see The Greatest Show on Earth, and you have the thousands of people in the cinema, and then it settles on the Fabelmans. I thought,
I found it actually quite sterile, that shot, because even though you're seeing a full cinema of people, they're people just sat expressionless watching the screen.
In that shot, yes, because you want. What's on display is the audience itself, the size of the theater, the hugeness of it, the glamour, it's such a grandiose place. And then, of course, as the scene unfolds, you have the audience participating and chuckling.
Yeah. But actually, what expresses that better for me is the films that Sam makes and shows in town halls or the school or whatever, and the audience's responses there. Because not only is it audience responses, but it's the people responding to their mates on screen, and obviously the parents are looking at the film that their son has made. And that actually reminded me of when I was making little films at university, and we would show them at these little screens that we put together, and they occasionally went down really well, and that was pretty great, And that feeling of being the guy stood behind the projector, watching everyone else watching your film and appreciating it, is really special if it works.
Sure. Actually, I loved all of those scenes, right? And this is in a way where, the Californian scenes play less well to me, because obviously, to be a film director, you've got to be super socially skilled, right? And you see that in all of the scenes until he gets to California, right? Because, he's got... at one point he says, Mom, we've got 40 kids coming over tomorrow, right? And you could see what each kid is contributing to the film. But it's his film. They're doing it for him. So he must somehow make them all want to contribute to his thing. Yeah. Right? So then this feeling of being kind of all alone, little victim of discrimination. Yeah, I think the person you've gotten to know up to that point would have found ways around that, which actually, I suppose he does by the end. But
it's interesting, but I think it's also... I think that's mitigated by the fact that really seems to be the first time he's encountered that kind of thing.
True. But then it's almost the first time that he's made to seem like a schnook. Yeah, the little Jewish guy who's got to be funny to get out of a situation. Whereas, you've just seen him as almost like a master of industry, directing 40 people and getting them all to do what he wants, which is partly the conversation he's had with his father.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I do what you do. In order to get this shot, I've got to get these departments, to work together to do this. Right? So I suppose that's one of the reasons why those scenes just feel so...
I suppose we've seen kind of picking up that, though, and learning that, because when he's first bullied by those kids, or it's not when he's first bullied, but when they kind of surround him in the playground, and that's when he's first accused of being a Christ killer, I think. He's seen the tall one making out with this other girl, and he reveals that to the girlfriend. So he's at first been just meek about it. He's been bullied by these new kids who don't like him, and very quickly he is taking the fight to him.
Yeah, so he becomes a political animal. It's true. And I suppose very quickly becomes a social one as well. So you do see that developing in California as well. But to me, it just felt off in relation to what you'd seen before.
In a way, we haven't seen him have to be that resourceful before, because he hasn't had to struggle to make his films. He hasn't had to work hard to kind of root around for the money or anything. No. He's very well catered for financially.
I mean, the film is very cozy in all of those ways. So really, by American standards, he's an upper middle class kid, right? His father is depicted as a kind of a genius who works for the very big companies of that period, General Electric and RCA, right?
And IBM.
And he gets cameras bought for him and editing equipment and money for film, which, kind of the film minimizes, right? But I think, what does he pay? $12 for 3 rolls of film?
I don't know. Can't remember.
Well, it's significant, right? Because in 1962, a working person's average weekly wage, might have been, I don't know, like $100 or something, right?
Was it something like $20 for film and $80 to rent a machine, something like that?
Yeah.
And the dad says that's $100 on a hobby, so it is a lot of money.
It is a lot of money, and kind of he gets all of that paid for. Yeah, he doesn't have to have a part-time job or, put it on his credit card.
Yeah.
Like, so.
Well, yeah, like the problems that the family has are not financial problems, but I think the film is kind of understanding of the parents' problems individually. Like the mother is this caged animal. The film makes it fairly explicit with the whole monkey thing in the cage that we see in shots.
Yes.
That she kind of identifies with and is her pet. And the dad is obviously the breadwinner, and he's the genius who's making this money and so on. But he seems to kind of struggle for a degree of purpose in his family. Like, that is his purpose, and he's an interesting character because he's always doing this kind of explaining thing. He's always trying to teach the kid things. Right from the start, it's all technical stuff. The first lines of dialogue in the film are explaining how film works. It's that whole 24 frames a second, and then it's illusion on the screen, and then it's magic. But he does that multiple times with kind of technical things, and that's his bailiwick. That's what he knows how to do. He's a technical, scientific person. And as the film develops, he starts to try and speak to his son about purpose, about the future, about, and he's particularly kind of, he's always supportive of his son, but he's a little bit dismissive of film. He keeps calling it a hobby, and he doesn't see it as a future. But still, there is something in that character that's about he's searching for a way to connect to his family or be useful to his family in a way that is more than just about money and where they live.
I mean, he's clearly in love with his wife, which must have been a bigger heartache than we get to see. He's clearly loves all his children, and that must be more of a heartbreak than we're allowed to see in this film. I did love the moment where the kid's living with his dad and has an anxiety attack, right? Like, and you see the father taking care of him and knowing how to take care of him, which I thought was really lovely. Though I did wonder in the film, the letter from the studio, had he kept it hidden until that moment? Well, it seemed to just be the postman today, but that's a good point. Actually, we don't see if he's like slipped it in with the post, doesn't he? Yeah, because he gives him the post, And then after he has this breakdown, he says, "Oh, you've forgotten this one, or have you looked at this one?"
I get the feeling, I don't know, I'd have to watch the scene again. It would be nice if that was how the scene was constructed. I get the feeling it's just that letter happened to show up in the mail that day and the dad has noticed it. But it would be nice if he's kept it to be able to provide it for his son.
Yeah, well,
but I don't think it's shown like that, so we don't
I thought that, because it comes later, right? And he'd already given him all the post.
Yeah. Right,
so, it kind of gave me the impression that maybe he'd been holding that back. Right, because he hoped his son would go to university and have a proper career and not,
Oh right, I see.
Not become.
So he was going to withhold the letter because he didn't want him to read it at all.
Yeah,
and then he decides to give it to him.
Yeah.
Oh, that's because I was taking your implication as he keeps it back so that he can do the nice thing for his son and show.
I think because the whole discussion is about going to university and to promise to try his best, and then of course you don't want kind of your kid to be like the uncle who puts his head on inside lion's mouth, right? Yeah, you don't want him to have that kind of career, yeah? Because that is also kind of woven into the film. And Judd Hirsch is marvellous in that role, by the way.
I tuned out in that scene.
Oh, I loved it.
I mean, Judd Hirsch at one point says, you talk too much when they hear the mum playing piano. You talk too much. And then he just talks for fucking ages. I lost interest.
Well, no, I loved it. I did. And actually, I thought that was an essential kind of element, really. Because you see another generation. And this is what I mean by the little touches that I find missing in the film. But actually, the Judd Hirsch is an example of how they could have been there. He comes to mourn his sister. Yeah, he's much more observant of the customs than the generation after. Yes, to lie on the floor, do Shiva, I think he says, or something.
Yeah, and tear his clothing.
Yeah, he's got more of an accent, than any of them. Yeah, so you see the old world in and then you also think, well, what makes this kid who, the impression is that he probably emigrated as a kid old enough to have an accent.
Yeah.
Then leave that kind of family to join the circus,
Yeah.
Just an example of how one little thing can have all these resonances or can open up interesting complexities and so on, right? Yeah, things that Spielberg could have, without making the film about that, could have just put there, yeah? So for anyone who wanted to kind of explore further, might find those things worth kind of speculating on or thinking about. And I think they're largely not there, though they are, I find, in that Judd Hirsch moment.
So, overall, the film is a fable, clues in the title, and I don't think I'm interested in watching it twice.
I don't know, I loved it. And actually, I think I would. I mean, I love the look of it. Yeah, it has that kind of early Kodachrome browns and yellows and reds and blues, you associate with the period. I think the cinematography is excellent. It's full of fascinating shots, not the least of the kids in the kids' films, right? I love Michelle Williams' performance in it. I think she's wonderful. She's wonderful about kind of conveying love and different kinds of love and affection. And it's so interesting because it's like the whole performance is almost full of loving looks, right? Like there's very little anger or shame or guilt or screaming. There's one moment, yeah? And all the rest is just different kinds of, loving looks. Yeah, I think she's like, the Sarah Bernhardt of loving looks. I loved her performance in it.
She's never done it for me. I don't get what people say in her, really. I don't hate her, as all. I don't connect with her that much, really.
So the thing is, I love this movie, right? Even though I think for the last hour I've been talking about all the things that I got a problem with it. Yeah, but I still love it. And actually kind of, I want to think about why the experience of watching it was so kind of moving and lovely and, to me.
Yeah, okay, well, you think about that.
All right. Well, on that note, thank you very much for listening. We're eavesdropping at the movies, and we are on
Apple Podcasts, Audible, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and YouTube. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter. And the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.